Ian's pulse hammered as the shuttle plummeted toward the alien surface, red warning lights flashing in the cramped cockpit. He fought the controls, but the gravity well had them caught in its grip. The ground rushed up, an impossible quilt of crystalline spikes and bubbling iridescent pools that reflected the ship's desperate descent. When they hit, the impact knocked the breath from his lungs and darkness swallowed him. When he awoke, the cockpit was tilted at a sharp angle. Sparks showered from a panel above his head, and the air was thick with the smell of burning circuits. His body screamed with pain, but his training kicked in. He reached for the emergency release, fumbling it open as a warning klaxon screeched in his ears. Crawling free, Ian found himself staring at a landscape he could never have imagined. The terrain glittered, alive with motion and color. The trees weren't trees at all, but enormous crystalline formations that swayed despite the lack of wind. The pools of liquid, if it could be called liquid, shifted hues in a hypnotic dance. It was beautiful, alien, and utterly hostile. He spotted a small rupture in the distance, thin plumes of smoke rising into the sky, a clear sign of volcanic instability. He didn't have long before the planet's surface started to tear itself apart. Ian grabbed his emergency kit and stumbled into the crystalline forest. Every step crunched as though he were walking on crushed glass. The air shimmered with a faint green haze, and a strange hum vibrated through the ground. His suit's environmental scanner chimed softly, warning of seismic activity. He didn't need the scanner to tell him what he already knew. He was stranded on a dying world. It was then that he heard the cry. At first he thought it was a trick of his imagination, a high-pitched wail that carried over the rumbling ground. But as he moved closer, the sound became unmistakable. He climbed over a ridge of shattered crystals and saw her, a small alien child, pinned beneath a fallen crystal branch. Her skin shimmered in the light, silver like liquid mercury, and her large, luminous eyes locked on his. She spoke in a musical language that his translator struggled to decipher. "Help, please." The sight of her brought Ian to his knees. The planet was in chaos, but he couldn't just leave her. He scrambled to her side, his suit all ready, pulling up a rough translation. "I'm here to help," he said, hoping she could understand the tone if not the words. The crystalline branch was heavier than it looked. Ian braced himself, his arms shaking as he heaved it off her. She whimpered, curling into a ball as he gently lifted her out of the wreckage. The ground bucked beneath them, and he nearly lost his footing. A plume of steam hissed from a nearby pool as the heat intensified. "Come on, kid," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "Let's get out of here." Carrying her was harder than he expected. She was small, but her body had a strange density, as if the silver skin wasn't flesh but some otherworldly alloy. Her eyes never left his, wide with trust and fear. With every step, Ian could feel the planet's fury growing. It wasn't just quakes now. Geysers erupted in the distance, and the once static crystals began to fracture under the strain. He activated his distress beacon, hoping the mothership would pick up the signal. There was no time to worry about whether they'd find him before the planet consumed itself. He just needed to get the girl to higher ground, away from the worst of the tremors. Finally, he found a relatively stable ledge, where a cluster of crystal formations had created a natural shelter. He set her down gently and scanned her for injuries. Her leg had a shallow gash that oozed a silvery fluid. It wasn't blood, at least not as Ian understood it, but it seemed to be a vital part of her body's function. He applied a basic sealant from his medkit, hoping the universal compounds would be compatible. "Where's your family?" he asked, even though he doubted she'd understand. "Are you alone?" She tilted her head, and for a moment, Ian thought she wouldn't respond. Then she pointed toward the horizon where towering crystalline spires rose against the green-hued sky. Mother, is there? Home. Ian stared in the direction she indicated. Between them and her home lay miles of unstable ground and an environment, growing more hostile by the minute. He didn't have time to consider the odds. His job was to save lives. Back on board the rescue vessel, Ian found himself at the center of a quiet storm. He sat in the med bay while the ship's scanners assessed the alien child, Rinkara, and the alien woman who'd appeared just after the rescue. Shalana, as she called herself, was regal in bearing. Her silver skin shimmered under the med bay's lights, and her voice carried an authority that made the humans nearby instinctively step back. Ian had no idea what he was dealing with. He just knew he was responsible. Shalana spoke Zelvarian, but by now the ship's advanced translators had fully calibrated to the language. "You saved my daughter," she said, her luminous eyes fixed on Ian. "You saved her from certain death." Ian shifted uncomfortably. He didn't know what else to do but nod. "I couldn't just leave her there." Shalana inclined her head. "You have performed an act of great honor. But you must understand, among my people, such a deed is not without consequence." Ian raised a brow. "Consequence?" Shalana gestured gracefully toward Rinkara, who was perched on a medical table, curiously examining a diagnostic scanner as if it were a new toy. "To save a life is to bind it to yours. By our laws, you are now responsible for her well-being and by extension mine." The words hung in the air, heavy and strange. Ian looked at Shalana, then at Rinkara, who waved at him with a small, bright smile. "I don't understand, I just did what anyone would have done." Shalana's expression softened. "In your culture, perhaps. But for Zelvarians, saving a life is not simply an act of kindness. It is a commitment. It is a bond that cannot be undone." Ian ran a hand through his short, cropped hair. This was the last thing he'd expected. He thought he was doing the right thing, saving a child from a planet about to rip itself apart. Now it seemed that in the eyes of this alien culture he'd inadvertently made himself part of their family. "I don't know what to say. I didn't mean to bind anyone to me." Shalana's gaze didn't waver. "It is not something that requires your intent. The bond exists now, and it means that my daughter and I must remain with you until the end." "Wait, the end of what?" "Our lives, of course." There was no hesitation in her response, no sign that she was joking. Ian's mouth opened, then closed. How could anyone make a law like that? He'd saved people before, dozens of times in his years as a pilot, but never had anyone claimed it meant they were stuck with him forever. His crew looked on from the edges of the room, whispering among themselves. Ian couldn't tell if they were more awestruck or amused. I don't think I can do that," he said finally. "I mean, I have a job, a mission. I can't just take on two aliens I barely know." Shalana stepped closer, her voice as calm as ever. "Would you rather have left her to die? Would you rather have walked away?" "No, of course not," Ian said quickly. "But that doesn't mean I'm ready to be part of your family. In Zelvarian law, readiness is not required. What matters is that you acted. You saved her. Now you must carry that responsibility." Ian sat back against the medbay's bulkhead, the implications sinking in. He had no idea what caring for two Zelvarians would even entail. Would they stay on the ship? Would they need special accommodations? He knew almost nothing about their physiology or culture, other than the little he'd just learned. One of his officers, Lieutenant Kenzie Monroe, leaned in to whisper, "What are we going to do, sir?" Ian shrugged helplessly. "I think the question is, what am I going to do?" Apparently I'm the one who's bonded to them. Monroe gave him a half smile. I'd say you just got adopted. Ian shot her a look. Not helping. Shalana continued, her voice calm but firm. Commander Beckett, I understand your hesitation. This is not a custom of your people, and it must seem strange, but it is our way, and my daughter and I will honor it. We will serve you as a family serves one another. We will share in your burdens and help shoulder your troubles. This is not a prison sentence. It is a bond of trust, one we will uphold. Ian looked at her, then at Rinkara, whose luminous eyes sparkled with curiosity and innocence. The weight of the moment settled on his shoulders. He had saved her, yes, but he had no idea what he was getting himself into. The first week aboard the vessel was, in a word, awkward. Ian was used to a regimented chain of command to clear roles and responsibilities. Now he was saddled with a bright-eyed alien child and her dignified, enigmatic mother. The crew, unsure how to approach the unexpected guests, kept their distance at first. Shalana remained composed, watching Ian closely as he handled the day-to-day operations of the ship. Rinkara, on the other hand, dove headfirst into every nook and cranny of the vessel, her curiosity boundless. Commander Beckett, Shalana said one evening, stepping into the ship's observation deck where Ian stood gazing out at the vast nebula they were passing through. I must thank you again for allowing us to remain aboard. I can see that it's unusual for you. Unusual is one way to put it, Ian replied, arms crossed. I'm not sure everyone on my crew understands why you're here. To be honest, I'm not sure I do. Shalana tilted her head, her silver skin glowing faintly under the soft lights. It is simply the way of our people. Your actions have created a bond. It is not something we question, not something we negotiate. It simply is. Ian shook his head. In my world, saving someone doesn't mean you take responsibility for them for life. I mean, it's not like we don't care about each other, but what you're talking about is a lot more binding. Perhaps, Shalana replied, but have you ever considered that our way might have merit? That by forging such connections, our people learn to see one another's lives as intertwined, as meaningful? Ian sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. He couldn't argue with her logic, but that didn't make it any easier. His crew was already voicing their concerns. Some worried about the strain on their supplies, others about the chain of command. Ian's ability to lead was being quietly questioned, and he knew it. He'd have to find a way to integrate the Zelvarians without losing the trust of his team. Over the next few days, Ian made an effort to involve Shalana and Rinkara in life aboard the ship. He assigned Rinkara to the engineering bay, under Chief Yara's watchful eye. At first Yara was hesitant. A kid in engineering? You've got to be kidding me, Commander. She's not exactly a kid, Ian had said. Her species is advanced in ways we don't understand. Besides, she's just observing for now. No harm in letting her learn. Surprisingly, Rinkara took to the machines with a natural curiosity that quickly won Yara over. She asked thoughtful questions and showed a knack for understanding the ship's systems. Within a week, Yara was laughing and teaching Rinkara the basics of human engineering. Shalana, meanwhile, spent much of her time in the medbay, quietly learning about human biology and offering insights into Zelvarian medicine. Her knowledge impressed Dr. Anton, the ship's physician. I'll admit, Commander, Anton said one evening, having Shalana here isn't such a bad thing. She's got a healing technique that's helping with Lieutenant Monroe's plasma burn. We might learn a lot from her. Bit by bit, the crew's unease began to fade. Rinkara's boundless enthusiasm became a source of light-hearted amusement, and Shalana's composed demeanor earned her a quiet respect. Still, the transition wasn't entirely smooth. The Zelvarians had customs and habits that often clashed, with human routines. Rinkara would wander into off-limits areas, not out of defiance but sheer curiosity, and Shalana's formal manner sometimes put the crew on edge. Ian worked hard to bridge the gap, often finding himself in situations he'd never trained for, mediating cultural misunderstandings, explaining human humor, adjusting the ship's protocols to accommodate alien physiology. It was exhausting, but he couldn't deny that the Zelvarians were becoming a part of the ship's rhythm. One evening, as the ship cruised toward the next supply outpost, Ian found himself in the mess hall with Rinkara. She was balancing a tray of human food, her expression a mix of delight and confusion. "Commander," she said, her voice bright, "do all your meals taste so tangy?" Ian chuckled. "Not all of them. That's a human fruit juice. It's sweet and sour." "I like it," she said, taking another sip and beaming at him. "Humans have such interesting tastes. On Zelvar, our food is often, how do you say, bland. Well, stick with Yara. She'll teach you all about our spices. Just don't touch anything red, trust me on that." Rinkara nodded solemnly. "No red. Understood." Ian smiled as he watched her eat, the strange weight on his chest beginning to lift. He still didn't know what lay ahead, but for now he had a new purpose: to ensure these two Zelvarians thrived among his crew, and perhaps to learn a bit from them as well. As the ship approached Earth's orbital station, Ian felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Bringing Shalana and Rinkara back to Earth's territory was no small decision. The political landscape between human and alien species was complicated, and Zelvarians, while not unknown, were still a rarity. Ian didn't know how Earth's bureaucracies would react to two unannounced alien refugees appearing out of nowhere. The ship docked, and as the crew disembarked, curious station personnel began to gather. Ian stood tall, flanked by Shalana and Rinkara. Rinkara clung to his side, her wide, luminous eyes scanning the station's sterile hallways with a mix of awe and apprehension. Shalana remained poised, her regal bearing unshaken by the attention. Earth's representatives, a small delegation of diplomats and security officials, arrived to greet them. Ian stepped forward, quickly explaining the situation. He told them of Zelvar's disaster, the rescue of Rinkara, and the Zelvarian law that bound Shalana and her daughter to him. The officials exchanged uneasy glances. One of them, a tall man named Director Carlson, spoke up. "Commander Beckett, your actions were commendable," Carlson said, his voice carefully measured. "But you must understand, bringing foreign species into Earth jurisdiction involves protocols. There are quarantines, background checks, diplomatic procedures. They're not invaders," Ian interrupted, his tone firm. "They're survivors. They lost their home and I couldn't just leave them behind. Zelvarian law binds them to me. If you want to process someone, process me first, but I won't let you treat them like criminals." Carlson regarded Ian for a long moment before nodding. "Very well. We'll move forward with expedited evaluations. But understand, Commander, that this is highly irregular." The first few weeks on the station were tense. Shalana and Rinkara were subjected to medical screenings, cultural orientation sessions, and endless questioning from human officials. Ian was their constant advocate, arguing against unnecessary restrictions and ensuring they had the freedom to adjust to their new environment. He knew the process was necessary to an extent, but he refused to let it dehumanize them, or more accurately, de-alienize them. As time passed, Shalana and Rinkara began to adapt. Rinkara, always curious, quickly learned human languages and started attending the station's educational programs. She made friends with human children and fascinated teachers with her knowledge of Zelvar's crystalline ecosystems. Shalana, with her calm wisdom, found a place among the station's scientific community, sharing Zelvarian medicinal techniques and contributing to joint research efforts. For Ian, the transition was bittersweet. His crew had dispersed to other assignments and his duties shifted from command to mentorship. He found himself helping Rinkara navigate human culture, mediating the occasional cultural misunderstanding, and ensuring that Shalana's contributions were recognized, not exploited. In doing so, he realized he had become not just their advocate, but a bridge between their world and his own. Eventually, the station's leadership acknowledged what Ian had known all along. The Zelvarians were not a burden, but a boon. Shalana's insights advanced human medicine, and Rinkara's perspective inspired a new generation of young explorers. The once skeptical officials began to see Ian's decision not as a mistake, but as a turning point in human-alien relations. Years later, Ian stood on a balcony overlooking the station's bustling hub. Shalana was beside him, her silver skin reflecting the station's artificial light. Rinkara was now a teenager, confident and curious, surrounded by human friends and peers. Ian couldn't help but smile as he watched her, knowing that she was thriving in a way he'd never dared to hope. "You've given us a new home," Shalana said softly. "Not just a place to live, but a place to belong." Ian shook his head. "You did that yourselves, I just got us here." Shalana turned her luminous eyes toward him. "You did more than that. You gave us a chance. That is not something we can ever forget." As the station hummed with life around them, Ian realized that he too had gained something unexpected. Not just a bond enforced by alien law, but a family he never knew he needed. A family that had changed his life. As months turned into years, the once contentious presence of Shalana and Rinkara became a quiet, accepted reality aboard the orbital station. Ian's advocacy hadn't just won over his crewmates, it had inspired others. By now, Shalana's research collaborations were producing results that had real, practical value for both humans and Zelvarians. Rinkara, still exuberant but now more mature, had become a symbol of what cooperation could achieve. Despite the initial hurdles, their presence was proving to be an asset rather than a liability. But not everyone shared this sentiment. Within Earth's vast political and scientific councils, debates raged over the implications of Ian's choice. By saving Rinkara and bringing the Zelvarians into human space, he'd set a precedent that some found troubling. What if every rescue mission inadvertently created lifelong ties? What if other species demanded the same treatment? The council that oversaw human-alien relations demanded a formal hearing to settle the matter once and for all. Ian dreaded the hearing, not for himself, but for what it could mean for Shalana and Rinkara. They'd built a life here. Rinkara had friends, and Shalana had colleagues who respected her insight. If the council ruled against them, their very existence on Earth could be called into question. On the day of the hearing, Ian stood before a panel of stern-faced officials, along with Shalana and a now teenage Rinkara. The room was stark, all polished metal and bright lights, with the Earth's curved horizon visible through a panoramic window. The council members sat behind a long table, their expressions neutral, but their eyes sharp. Commander Beckett, the lead counselor, began. "You've made quite the impression. Not just as an officer, but as an unexpected ambassador. This hearing isn't about what you've accomplished. We acknowledge the valuable contributions of both Shalana and Rinkara. But the core issue remains. What precedent does this set?" Ian glanced at Shalana and Rinkara before speaking. "I understand the concern. This is uncharted territory for all of us, but precedent isn't necessarily a bad thing. If we can show that integration is possible, that cooperation strengthens us, then why should we fear it?" Shalana and Rinkara are living proof that our species can coexist, even thrive together. Another counselor, a woman with a stern expression, leaned forward. And what happens when the next alien child is rescued? And the next? Do we bind ourselves to them as well? Ian met her gaze. We'll take it case by case, as we do with any major decision. This isn't about a blanket policy. It's about understanding that sometimes doing the right thing isn't simple or convenient. It's about taking responsibility for our actions, even when it's uncomfortable. Shalana stepped forward, her calm voice filling the chamber. Humans often speak of compassion, of the value of life. We have seen that your people are capable of great kindness. My daughter and I do not wish to be burdens. We only wish to contribute, to share what we know and to learn from you in return. If our presence sets a precedent, let it be one that encourages understanding, not fear. Rinkara, now more confident in her human language skills, added, We're just like anyone else. We want to help. We want to be part of something bigger. I've learned so much from humans, and I think you can learn from us too. The council deliberated for hours. The room buzzed with whispers and debates. Finally, the lead counselor stood and delivered their decision. This council recognizes that Commander Beckett's actions, while unconventional, have led to outcomes that benefit both humans and Zelvarians. We acknowledge the unique circumstances and the value of their continued presence. We will not mandate that future cases follow the exact same path, but we will not reject the possibility of bonds formed through acts of compassion. Shalana and Rinkara are welcome to remain as valued members of this station's community. Relief flooded Ian's chest. He glanced at Shalana and Rinkara, who both smiled, Shalana's expression serene, Rinkara's joyful. The hearing had been a test of everything they'd built, and they'd passed it. They were no longer just passengers on a human ship or guests on a human station. They were a part of something larger, something that proved that different worlds could come together to create something new and extraordinary.